Okay, good morning, everyone. I think it's already 10 o'clock on dot, and I think we have to start so that others can actually, we need to join us maybe on the call. Okay, my name is Babatunde Olariwaju Emmanuel. I work with Futux Agri Consult Limited. Futux Agri Consult is a private agri extension working with smallholder farmers, building capacity and also supports implementation of certification, especially for export market. So this morning, we'll actually be having a discussion on the wonderful topic, which I know that every one of us very interested in, and that is the challenges in the fishery and the aquaculture subsector in Nigeria. So firstly, before we start, there will be the first pool. Janica, can you just project the first pool? The first pool is actually to just get our view about the aquaculture and the fishery sector in Nigeria. So now you'll be seeing on your screen a pool. Do you think aquaculture has great potential in Nigeria? I want us to respond. Do we think that aquaculture has a great potential in Nigeria? So I have about some few more seconds. About 25% of the participants have actually voted. Now 37% of the participants have voted. Still waiting. Yeah, we have 50% of the participants have voted. And, still waiting for others. Okay. So we have 100% of the participants actually voted. About 60% of the participants have voted, and we have few more people to vote. 70%. We think that aquaculture has great potential in Nigeria. Okay. So I think it's good. Yes, we have about 72% of the participants voted, and 100% of participants believe that aquaculture has a great potential in Nigeria. I think we can all see the results right now. I've shared the results. You can see 100% of the people that voted believes out of people present believe that aquaculture has a great potential in Nigeria. And that's why we are here. We actually also have this belief that aquaculture has a great potential in Nigeria. And this is why we want to also see how best can we revive the aquaculture in Nigeria. And one key thing I want us to also understand is actually that for this webinar, I would like that immediately we come in, we kindly mute our mic. We should please try to mute our mic immediately we come in. And also, if we have any question we want to ask, there's a chat box by the right-hand side. You can actually put in your chat. You can put in your chat your questions, your clarifications, and the likes, and I'll be able to respond to it during the Q&A session. And this is the agenda for the meeting. We have the introduction, the welcome address by Mr. Sadiq Usman, the keynote address by Dr. Abba Yakubu, and the first guest speaker by David Mesegaro, and the second speaker by Mr. Owuno Ogbe. And we have a panel discussion by four wonderful panelists which we'll be learning from. That's Mr. Momo Mustafa, Dr. Ebinibi, Mr. Larry Badmos, and Mr. Remy Abioye. After that, we'll have our Q&A. So immediately any guest is actually talking and you really want to ask questions, I will actually advise us to just put a question in the chat box, and after the whole session during the Q&A, we'll be able to address to at least most of all the questions. So straight away to the welcome address by Mr. Sadiq Usman. So I'll be reading out the citation of Mr. Sadiq Usman. So Mr. Sadiq Usman has a bachelor degree in economics, business and finance from the University of East Anglia, UK. He also has a master's degree in development economy from School of Oriental and African Studies University of London, UK. And before taking up the role at CBN, Mr. Sadiq was a vice president at JP Morgan Chase Bank NA, where he worked in a variety of roles serving the financial needs of sub-Saharan African financial and corporate clients. In CBN, he actually worked as the special assistant to the governor on economic development, and he was involved in crisis resolution, banking reform, and policy development. He also served as secretary to the Bankers Committee subcommittee on economic development and sustainability. And Mr. Sadiq is currently also a non-executive director at the Northern Nigeria Flour Mill PLC. That's a grain processing company. He has initially joined the group as the head corporate business development and later took up the role of deputy COO, agro-allied and director, backward integration program. And currently, Mr. Sadiq Usman is a director of group strategy and stakeholder relations of Flour Mills of Nigeria, and is responsible for the Flour Mill new business ventures and investment, acquisition, corporate development, corporate communication, and regulation affairs. And let us welcome Mr. Sadiq Usman for his welcome address. Mr. Sadiq, you have the floor. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Babatunde, for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. And also it's a particular pleasure to be asked to deliver this opening address. There's one thing very important that was missing from my CV, which I should declare up front. I also am a board member of the Nigerian-Belgian Chamber of Commerce. So I'm particularly delighted to be here and to have been asked to give this welcome address. The topic is a very interesting one indeed, and something close to my heart: challenges in the fisheries and aquaculture subsector in Nigeria. And I'll explain why in my remarks, but let me just go through my remarks if you don't mind. In terms of a background, the Food and Agricultural Organization, FAO, revealed that over 13 million Nigerian children are affected by chronic malnutrition. Therefore, ensuring adequate levels of animal-sourced food consumption is considered to be one of the keys to combating malnutrition, and fish is among the most important animal-sourced foods across the nation. Fish consumption today accounts for about 35% of consumption expenditure for animal proteins and constitutes about another 10% of food consumption expenditure by the average Nigerian. So you can see the relative importance. Nigeria's current fish production, though, stands at 0.8 million metric tons, so 800,000 tons, and there's a deficit of about 1.9 million metric tons of fish, which is quite surprising considering a significant coastline. But more importantly, I would say even beyond the coastline, is the significant river systems that we know exist in the country. And what is even more shocking is currently it's expected or it's forecasted that we spend on average about $1.2 billion in valuable FX in importing fish into the country. And this is according to the Central Bank of Nigeria. In fact, the agriculture value chain, though, happens to be growing quite quickly at about more than 30% a year by some projections. The catfish dominates the sector, but we know tilapia is also farmed. The sector's overwhelming operating concern happens to be fish feed, which by some estimates can account for anything between 55 to 70% of all costs for a farmer. A number of fish feed suppliers exist, from cottage industries to commercial operations, such as Premier Feeds, which happens to be a business I oversee, and one that is part of the Flour Mills Group. I think you know it probably more by the popular Top Feeds brand. Sorry. We also know that, sorry. We also know that some fish farmers produce their own feed. So building competitiveness of the fish feed sector will require product development and trials. We need to substitute inputs to achieve the best protein and energy mix at the lowest possible cost. As crucial ingredients in the fish feed for both the maize and soybean value chains directly impact the competitiveness of the aquaculture sector. As I've said, fish feed has about 55 to 70% production cost for the inputs. The fish feed sector, therefore, offers great commercial opportunities for maize and soybean producers. Therefore, in exploring challenges in the aquaculture sector, it is important to look through the entire value chain to understand the cause and effects, in my view. So, what are these challenges? Nigeria's aquaculture industry is characterized by poor access to soft credit facilities, the lack of requisite technical skills, and unavailability of quality and moderately priced fish seeds and feeds. This all mitigates the sector's growth and development. Some other key challenges faced are the quality of fish feed is weak. So we then have brook stock recycled many times. There's no standard nutrition or feeding chart. So that is saturated amongst the toll millers. No regulation in the industry to a large extent, particularly on the cottage industry side. There's limited research on cultivable species. As I said earlier, the vast majority of what we do in the country today is predominantly the African catfish, and with about 5 to 10% tilapia. There's inadequate technical knowledge on hatchery operations and fish culture, and the high cost of production that I've talked about, because it is import dependent. And so every devaluation of the Naira and liquidity challenges in securing dollar ends up making fish feed expensive and results in promoting patronage of substandard feeds. In closing, my expectation is that in today's discourse, there will be more emphasis on practical solutions to the development of agriculture locally to meet up with the increasing demand due to the rise in population. These thematic areas I've seen in the concept notes: inputs, finance, technology, development and deployment, water and soil management, capacity building, climate change, technology, women and youth should be strategic priorities in forming the foundation for initiatives to develop the aquaculture value chain. As we are all aware, Africa, and indeed Nigeria, as I've highlighted earlier, has the maximum total available area for aquaculture and significantly high potential for development. And it is my hope that through appropriately well thought through innovations and utilizing all the internal and external sources of support, Nigeria will be able to make substantial progress in establishing aquaculture as a viable food production industry, as a source of exports and foreign exchange, and indeed as a source, most importantly, of nutrition to a growing population. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sadiq Usman. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. Thank you so much, really appreciate it. One key thing is that it's just in alignment with what we started, that the fishery and aquaculture subsector is very important in Nigeria. We can see the gaps, what the demand and the supply is, so which is an area that we should look into. Thank you so much once again, Mr. Sadiq Usman. I would like to go directly to our keynote address by Dr. Abba Yakubu Abdullahi Dr. Abba Yakubu Abdullahi is the ex-president, as the former president, Fisheries Society of Nigeria, that's FISO. I'll just do a short citation of Mr. Dr. Abba Abdullahi. Dr. Abba Abdullahi was born in 1957 in Katsina State, Nigeria. He's a graduate of Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria, with BSc in Zoology and MSc in Zoology Fisheries, and University of Abuja with a PhD Zoology, also in Fishery. So join me to welcome Dr. Abba Yakubu Abdullahi as he gives us his keynote address. Thank you. Dr. Abba, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very much delighted to be on this panel today, most especially as the keynote speaker. I feel honored, honestly, by giving me this kind of opportunity. So I'll just go straight into my presentation, and I'm going to share my screen. I hope we can all see it. Can we all see it? Hello?
No.
Can you see the screen?
No.
Not yet? Oh my God.
Yes, the screen is not up yet.
You can, it's not yet?
Yes.
It just goes to the share button.
It's not.
Okay.
Just go to the share screen.
Yes.
Then you click on it.
Okay.
Then you can check where you save. Check where you save your files.
Oh, okay.
Good.
Now you can see it?
Yeah.
You can see it, eh?
Yes,
I see. I see.
yes, we can see you.
Okay, thank you very
see.
much. Yes, well, you all know the topic that is preparing solution to the challenges of fisheries and aquaculture in Nigeria. It depends on who is speaking. Sometimes when we are talking of this kind of a topic, people tend to go more for aquaculture, while in some other cases, we find that people just go for the capture fisheries. But I'm going to cover this so that we can bring out the salient points that need to be utilized, or maybe it needs to boost our production so that we can meet our ever-increasing fish demand supply for Nigeria. As I say, Nigeria, everybody knows it's a high fish consuming nation, about 2 million tons per year, and about 60% of that is imported, as rightly mentioned by the speaker that mentioned, the previous speaker. Sorry. And there are also domestic fish supplies from about 5 major sources: importation, inland, estuaries, and coastal fisheries, then industrial fisheries and aquaculture. Brackish coastal water and inland fisheries contribute about 30% of our fish supply, while industry about 4% and aquaculture about 15%. Then, then with the current population of Nigeria, about 200 million, which has been estimated. The gap deficit is expected to be about 1,270,000 metric tons, and the per capita consumption of this 13.5. Probably maybe that one can argue whether it's still the same or it has gone down or whatever. But if the target global of 16 kilograms per year per capita consumption, then the requirement will be about 30% more than the just forecasted 1.27 million. And capture fisheries have been majorly affected by piracy, militant groups in the maritime areas, while aquaculture since 2000 has been growing exponentially in Nigeria through catfish and tilapia production. Therefore, from this, we can easily say that aquaculture therefore remains the quickest way of meeting the fish and supply deficit. The inland fisheries, which is the subsector, supports hundreds and thousands of rural producers, livelihoods, and millions of low-income fish consumers. And inland fish is totally artisanal and crucial to rural communities as a source of employment, nutrition, and income. So you can see, in terms of food security and economic development, especially in rural areas, inland fisheries, capture fish is very, very important. However, there are constraints to that development of this capture fisheries. We have environmental degradation, we have overexploitation, we have management difficulties, both at the national levels and the local level. Then you have the product value and economic loss. And all these constraints operate within the varying intensity at different geographical locations and at different institutional levels. Consequently, if we go to each of these items, we'll see what. Now, if you take environmental constraints, this range from man-made problems, that is water resources, development, agriculture, domestic and industrial wastage, and climate change. So in terms of the man-made constraints, one of the principal things that affected capture fisheries in Nigeria is dam construction and river regulations. Reduce catch through habitat loss, that is when you construct dam, you reduce catch through habitat loss. For every square kilometer of inundated floodplain lost, a potential loss of 5 to 10 tons per fish is being experienced with that. Therefore, reduce catch and diversity by prevention of river waters entering into the floodplain, reduces fish breeding potential, feeding opportunities, growth and production of biodiversity, and it is estimated productivity is reduced by 2 tons per kilometer square. Now, if you're talking about irrigated agriculture, the possible loss of habitat through improved drainage and from the increased use of agrochemicals, that fertilizer and pesticides, that's all affects the quality of the water, so subsequently affect the fish health. High levels of pesticides pollution with adjacent water bodies leads to fish mortalities, impaired growth, reduction of increased susceptibility and diseases. Now, if you go to the water pollution itself, urban and industrial development often result in water pollution through the discharge of untreated domestic and industrial waste. This is most especially when you go to industrial cities like Lagos and probably the Niger Delta area, you know what we're talking about this. Then the issue of this climate change. Serious periodic drought experiences during recent decades, especially in the semi-arid northern parts of Nigeria, result in devastating impact of inland population, fish population and fisheries. This is typically exemplified by the shrinking of Lake Chad, which is one of the main causes of that have been identified to these insecurity challenges because of the loss of economic activity in that area. Now, the technical constraints, you have what we call it inadequate fisheries information. The last catch assessment survey was carried out in 2007, and since then they have not been covering inland and coastal fisheries. Since then, there is no new one. The insufficient baseline in the magnitude of dynamics and fish resources have weakened the sector planning and management. Then absence of fishing effort data derived from updated frame surveys precludes the application of fisheries production models needed to assess the current status of fisheries. Now, in terms of fisheries management, that's another technical constraint. Centralized fisheries management, planning, formulation, and establishment of statutory fisheries regulation by the Federal Department of Fisheries with no updated law backing it. Then there is also weak enforcement, which I have mentioned earlier, at the national and also at the state level due to financial constraints, probably low budgetary allocation to the sector. Now, the result is you have an ineffective fisheries management resulting in overexploitation of adult brood stock for fish and in small perennial waters during the most critical dry season. Now, still on the technical constraint, so what are the solutions to this? One solution is develop fisheries management strategy based on the accurate identification of major constraints. Then you should support and encourage the establishment of fisheries management system using partnership between government and traditional systems. In most communities, you find that fisheries are being controlled by traditional system, but unfortunately with little or no scientific basis. So when you combine these two, you're going to have a sort of like an effective management system. Now, there is also an Fisheries Act that has been sponsored by European Economic Commission in 2014. That act has been developed and is through vast consultation within the sector, but up to now it has not been enacted and nobody's talking about it. I'm sure if this is enacted, it will cover most of this problem, both for aquaculture and inland fisheries. Now, another big problem is this post-harvest loss. This arose because fish need to be transported to urban areas, or simple site processing that could lessen the storage life in the fishing communities need to be installed so that you can preserve the quality of the fish for more income to the fishermen. Fish processing method mostly in these communities are sun drying and smoking, or both, but you hardly find a modern system of preserving this fish. Traditional ovens, everybody knows, are inefficient and they cannot produce high quality products fit for international markets. Then with fish loss, there is reduction of economic value of a poorly processed product. Now, several institutional constraints relate not only to the fisheries sector, but to its interaction with the related sectors such as water resources, agriculture, and pollution control. So this lack of integrated planning and management capability for inland aquatic resources, which brings insufficient communication, coordination, and collaboration between water resources, agriculture, environment. Everybody is doing its own thing. In fact, you find that most, especially water resources, they never give any consideration to fishes, while fish are the primary occupants of that water body. But whenever they want to do for water supply, nobody gives fishes takes fishes into consideration. So the result is there is lack of integration between the sector planning and policy formulation. Dam construction for irrigation and water supply have caused immense damage to downstream fishes, agriculture, livestock, and wildlife. And the solution is focus on programs designed to manage aquatic resources through strengthening and integrated resource planning and management capabilities by the federal, state, and local governments. Now, in the as we mentioned earlier, inappropriate direction of the Federal Department of Fisheries Development Programs. So what they need to do now, FDF must focus on improved fisheries information and collection methods, establishment of effective fisheries extension services, and fisheries research institutes to focus on adaptive research to respond to the changing needs of the fisheries sector. Now, there is also insufficient research on rivers and floodplains. Most of the research you find that it is on lakes and dams, because we did some analysis. Almost about 80% of the papers that we come across published by the university mostly is on lake research. So most research efforts on inland fisheries focus on fisheries, reservoirs, fisheries, and aquaculture. And this produce 80% of the production derived from rivers and floodplains. Now, this appropriate efforts bears no relationship to the major constraint placed on the subsector, nor on the immediate needs of the artisanal fishermen. That is because of the negligence of the rivers and floodplains. Therefore, fishery research should focus more on floodplains and rivers fisheries. Now, when we come to the marine, that's another different ballgame also. Nigerian marine artisanal fisheries is estimated valued at about 20 billion naira at landing point, then around 40 billion naira at the chain market. That is based on the current price. Then fishermen villages, however, are mostly temporary camps located close to the sea, and the settlements in most cases lack drinking water, social amenities like drinking water, schools, clinics, electricity, and no shops or stores, etc. So fish catch from the coastal artisanal fisheries communities could be increased by 70,000 tons a year of production value, that is a landing point, by over 60 billion naira if these major constraints are tackled. One, increase mechanization. Two, eliminate conflict with commercial fishing vessels, provide reservation facilities, improve local transport, enhance access to higher quality processing, and facilitate value. We're going to just run through each of this. Now, if you're talking of mechanization, at the marine coastal areas, only about 20% or less of the canoes are motorized. Therefore, near shore area of 5 kilometers out tend to therefore be overfished. The rest of the artisanal zone, 2 to 5 nautical kilometers, are declared by law offshore, and beyond the 40 and 50 kilometers, relatively underfished because of this lack of motorization. Therefore, they cannot go further out into the sea. Then average low catch per canoe in Nigeria is due to this lack of motorized craft. Now, conflict reduction, also, if you want to increase this production, you have to reduce conflict between commercial fleets of shrimp and fish trawlers in Nigeria, which often venture into the non-trawl zone, exclusively that 5 nautical miles exclusively reserved for the artisanal fishermen, but you find that they come into that area to do their fishing. So as a result of this, fishermen lost about 8,000 tons per year, which is about 8 billion naira. Now, access to higher quality processing and higher value markets. Nigeria loses between 15 to 20% of its fish produce. If only 20%, 40% of that loss could be prevented, the value increase in income will be in the order of billions of naira to the fishermen and the women, fish smokers, and fish sellers at the coastal fisheries alone. So the absence of preservation and transport facilities therefore exclude fishermen from the higher value market, mostly, especially the international market. Now, we all know these coastal areas will produce a lot of oil. So what is the effect of these oil companies? It is estimated that a total of 2,800 square kilometers of coastal areas are taken over by the oil industry for extraction facilities. And coastal fisheries may therefore be losing potential catch of 28,000 metric tons through the loss of access to these areas, because they are not allowed to go there, the fish oil installations through, and they lose the catch from seabeds and the master stock that are found around that area. So the physical presence of the oil installation poses also pollution from oil spills, leaks, discharges from wells, pipelines, and terminals. And pollution results in juvenile fish mortality and spawning problems for the coastal areas. The effect may be reducing the fish surviving maturity to maturity by over 30,000 to 40,000 tons per year. So you can see the effect of this oil operations within the coastal areas. Now, the constraint facing commercial industry, that is trawling in the marine areas. We have weak management structures. We have lack of confidence to invest in activities without substantial public assistance. You have non-adherence to defined rules, like coming into the non-trawl zone. Then heavy trawling gear causes long-term ecological damage to the flora and fauna of the seabed. So these are all the detrimental effects that operations of commercial fishes that within our territorial waters, most especially in the non-trawl zone, exclusively reserved for the artisanal fishermen. So that's about the capture fishes. Now we go to the in thing now, what everybody's talking about, that is aquaculture. We all know aquaculture is one of the components of agricultural production system in Nigeria. Major species cultures include tilapia, catfish, as rightly mentioned earlier, with African catfish, Claris graphinus, is the most farmed. Then Nigeria is the largest African aquaculture producer with production of about almost 15,000 metric tons per annum, closely followed by Egypt, which is about 5,000 metric tons. Incidentally, Egypt are the highest tilapia producer, while Nigeria produces the highest producer of catfish in Africa. So despite these great potentials, Nigeria is still unable to bridge the gap on the shortfall between the total domestic production and total domestic demand. So what are the actions needed to improve this quality, improve aquaculture development, so that we can use it to meet up this demand? One, government policies. Government should encourage fish farmers by involving a number of non-fiscal incentives, like grants for development, government equity shareholding, government insurance, leasing facilities, compensations, subsidies for construction equipment supplies, labors, and price support. Aquaculture is one of the few areas that's little understood by commercial banks. You go there, you hardly find people ready, commercial banks ready to support it, because up to now you don't have any clear economic analysis of the profitability of aquaculture. So that is one area that maybe needs to be looked at seriously, so that we can come up with a model that the bank can utilize. So, but before that, government will need to support. Support is given to agriculture all over the world, especially these areas that need to be brought up. Credit loans with defined repayment schedules and loan guarantees should be made available, and we should also strengthen contract arrangement between outgrowers and private companies, just like what is happening under Uncle Boros program on crop sector. So probably maybe that should be applied to aquaculture. Now, the problem of one of the important factor of production in aquaculture is water. Water is one of the most critical factors beside the good feeding for fish production. Water availability varies with time of the day, season, weather conditions, water resource, soil type, temperature, stocking density, feeding rate, and culture system. This is very critical, especially in northern part of Nigeria, where you have limited availability of water. The major sources of water for fish farmers, tap waters, wells, and boreholes. For successful aquaculture venture calls for taking into consideration on the dynamics and the management of this water quality in the culture. And that brought us also to the issue of collaboration between water resources and agriculture, so that we know how to manage the water resources for both sectors. Then greatest challenges, however, encountered for water supply is the pollution for industrial activities, mining, and petroleum industry. Now, land. For you to do aquaculture, you need the land also. So land availability in agriculture production in Nigeria involves the complexity of interacting variables such as pollution, land tenure system, level, and type of technology to be deployed. So these variables, especially the land tenure system, put mostly, especially in the southern part of the country, put serious limitation on the amount of land that is available for aquaculture. So also that needs to be looked into to see how we can overcome this. Now, production and management, the principal technical challenges of fish farming include lack or poor management of broodstock. That has been mentioned earlier. Then poor record keeping of all activities, that spawning, care of eggs feeding. This is one of the problems that most commercial banks will look, and they will not have adequate information for them to do some economic analysis for funding of agriculture. So other factors that affect aquaculture include capital. It's a capital intensive thing, the cost of labor, the security, the marketing, the preservation, distribution, transportation, the fish and fish products. Now, feeding, that has clearly been mentioned, that constitutes about 50 to 60, sometimes up to 70% of the cost of production. Like in here, where we get feeds mostly from the Lagos and the western part of the country, the feeds are quite high. So complete diet supply for all ingredients, that's protein, carbohydrates, are essential for optimal growth. While supplemented diet do not contain the full complements of nutrients needed, but are used to help to fortify the naturally available diets. So good nutrition in fish production system is essential for the health and high quality. If you don't have good feed, good nutrition for the fish, you won't have good quality products. So however, high cost of feed in Nigeria has greatly increased cost of fish production due to the lack of raw materials of fish meal. Most especially fish meal, which is mostly imported. As you rightly mentioned, feeds consume about 50 to 60%, while in the formulation of feeds, fish meal consumes almost 60 to 70% of that cost, and most of it is imported. So we need to look at local sources of this fish meal. We have a lot of potential species of fish, like the mesopelagic latent fish within our territorial waters, which is said to be harvested for fish meal production. Now, disease also can easily spread because of the high density stocking and intensity of feeding in limited areas. Some fish may be some parasites are highly pathogenic. If you are not careful, you find that they wipe out the whole fish population within your pond. And some parasites have also some zoonotic potential. Therefore, they constitute public health hazard. So this has to be looked into, especially now with the common theory that is coming, like the COVID-19, that's some people are speculating it started from the wet market in China, and wet market, that's where fish are sold and all this kind of thing. So we need to look at this so that we have a critical analysis to find out if it is true and how do we tackle it. Now, marketing and distribution, seasonality, scarcity, and means of preservation, which are the main problems of fish marketing, and transport to also a major problem to fish marketing and distribution in Nigeria. So because most fish fresh sellers travel by road, and some of the roads are in bush tracks, while others are tied by the state of disrepair. So this reduces the volume of traffic on the roads and raises the cost, and also contributes to the deterioration of the quality of the fish before it reaches its market. Now, another thing is extension services or education.
Dr. Abba,
I'm going to the last one now.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so majority of fish scientists focus on technical aspect without taking into consideration the extension system for aquaculture. So you find that there's limited knowledge on this, and people don't have much extension experience in extension services. And as I've said, most important constraints are low dissemination of knowledge, limited capacity, research not following farming system, and other critical problems like poor storage facilities and all this. So in conclusion, there is need for urgent attention to fisheries and aquaculture policies, laws, and regulations that could facilitate fish food system, food nutrition, and security. And in addition, quality assurance, standard, and sustainable system that will be in harmony with Nigerian demands for ecosystem and environmental management should be focused. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abba. Really appreciate that. That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. We'll actually move next to our first guest speaker, and that is Mr. David Messiagaru. So sorry, Mr. David Messiagaru. So I'll just say a brief introduction of Mr. David. Mr. David will actually be talking about, he's actually the sales and financial planning manager for Olam. He will be talking about solutions to the challenges of the fisheries and aquaculture subsector in Nigeria. And if you see what Dr. Abba presented, he has actually mentioned some key things. So Mr. David will be talking about the solutions. Briefly, I will just read the citation of Mr. David. Mr. David is in Nigeria with the first degree in computer engineering from the University of Lagos. He has about 5 years of work experience in areas of design, automation, programming as an engineer. Then he got his second degree, an MBA from the prestigious Lagos Business School. He was the class president of the MBA 13th set, and also he switched into the world of management and business decision making in finance, account processing, marketing, human resources, and strategy. He has worked in agricultural and manufacturing sector for over 7 years, and in the position of management, and he recently joined Olam as the animal feeds and proteins, and specifically the fish feed division. Welcome, Mr. David, to have the floor. You have the floor, Mr. David. Hello, Mr. David.
I think he must have been disconnected. He was just a few minutes ago here. So shall we switch around the guest speakers? Because I don't see him anymore online.
Okay. don't know if Mr. Uno Ogbe is actually available, so that he can go for. And when Mr. David comes back, he can take the platform. Maybe Mr. Uno Ogbe, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, ready to go.
Okay, let me just introduce, just read the citation. Mr. Uno Ogbe is the CEO of Fugo Farms. He will be talking about exporting aquaculture, food security versus FX earning. That's a foreign exchange earning. So, citation, Mr. Uno Ogbe is the founder of Farmer, just another ambitious company trying to organize the smallholder farmer economy in Nigeria. Mr. Uno is the CEO of Fugo Farms, an integrated agri company specializing in broiler and cattle production and sales. With an educational background in engineering and prior work experience in sales, marketing, and communication. He previously worked at the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority. He believes that increased productivity is key to Nigeria's and Africa's positive economic growth. Mr. Uno, you're welcome. You have the floor right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Just try and get my screen up. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Yes.
Okay.
For security.
All right. Okay. So, yeah. So, good morning, everyone. I've gone for a fairly different approach with my presentation today. Obviously, there's a lot of there's a lot of data and information on on the demand for dried fish, on how little we're producing, how much we're importing, etc. And I think some of the other speakers today have spoken to that. So I'm going to jump into something that's quite specific, and I think just to provide a good range of texture to the talk and to the program today. So I'm just going to turn on my. Okay. So about the Fugo Farms, our farm was built in 1994. It's out of Kuje, Abuja. We produce broiler chickens. We used to produce catfish directly, but now we outsource our catfish production and we continue to produce dried catfish. And we also provide training programs. Okay. Right. So as of 2019, most of our business was actually the production and sales of dried catfish. However, the broiler business was a much smaller sector of our business. As of today, excuse me, broiler accounts for about 75% of our business, and dried catfish is down to about 5%, and our training does 20%. Obviously, this is an aquaculture conversation, so I will explain in my further slides why there have been some changes to the volume of dried fish that we produce and sell, and what our plans are for that generally going forward into the future. So, right, so why the drop in our dried fish sales? So typically, like any other business, we're in a marketplace and we constantly keep an eye on the market and we respond to marketplace changes. Now, at the peak of 2019, our dried fish products, we went for a sort of premium supermarket shelf type of dried catfish products, right? So obviously, dried catfish is not something you'd struggle to find from any sort of street corner or any market. But we felt that there was an opportunity in that sector. So with the approach that we took, our distribution channels largely relied on supermarkets. Like we'd have to get our products into stores, service these stores. And then the way most supermarkets work in Nigeria, it's a sale or return arrangement. So they do not buy inventory upfront. They will take it from you. And then depending on the store and your arrangements with the store, most times when the product sells, you come back and you collect your own money. So obviously, I mean, it makes sense for them from their own business model. So at the peak of 2019, I think we're in about 125 stores across Nigeria, Lagos, Port Harcourt, Abuja, Kano, Kaduna, across the country. We had different distribution models. So for most of our stores in Abuja, because our farm is in Abuja, we were able to take the product there directly. Whereas for places like Kaduna, Kano, we had distributors that we used to work with who would essentially open up the stores, get our products there, and then sort of manage the inventory. So our job is to send them inventory, their job is to send it to the stores. Now, a number of challenges have been highlighted with aquaculture in Nigeria, and rising fish feed prices is absolutely a very, very key one. So essentially, when fish feed prices rise, then the cost of fish rises, which means the cost of our dry catfish must always rise. So we had to do a price revision, and we had to increase our prices. And obviously this wasn't very welcome by the stores, but it was the only thing we could do to keep the business going. This led to a sharp decline in sales. I mean, we had stores that would sell 300-400 packs a month, going down to as little as 50-60 packs. So there was a significant drop there. One of the big challenges that we faced was from the supermarkets themselves. So essentially, the way, like I described before, you drop your product, when it sells, you go for money. Sometimes, we would go to a store, up to 5 times to pick up a check of, say 100,000 naira. Obviously, the cost of servicing these distribution channels started to pile up. You go one time and they'll tell you, oh, madam is not around, she's the only one that signs checks. Or, I have, my field sales guys there as early as 7 a.m. There's a long queue. By 10 a.m., they're like, oh, we're done paying for this week, till next week. So it was increasingly difficult to manage that. And, our receivables started to grow. So ultimately, we sat down, had a keen look at it and made a strategic business decision to close down most of our outlets, and then focus on outlets that were willing to do business on our own terms. One of our key terms was that we cannot come to collect money. You have to pay a check to our account or pay us via transfer. So it's only stores that agreed to do this that we continued working with. So right now, I think we are in about 28 stores, down from 120, but there's a lot more peace and sanity, right? There's less money that is going out there lost. There's less wahala. So we'd rather sell small sales and see our cash than think we're selling big sales with money that is in the air. So that's really what led to that, largely speaking. Now going to the main heading of my presentation, food security versus FX revenue. These are two very, very key things that we need to think, that affects us as a country. We want to have food security. People need to eat food. And we don't really want to rely on any other countries for producing the food that we eat here. And I think COVID also made that very clear to us in Nigeria. Because, when things like that happen, COVID was obviously an unprecedented event, but countries will need to take care of themselves first. So even in terms of buying food as a country, it's a marketplace. We're going to a market, we're trying to buy stuff to import. When there are challenges, countries will take care of themselves first. It's simple, right? So that's why food security is doubly important. We cannot be solely relying on other nations for the food that we buy. At the same time, there are export opportunities with aquaculture, huge opportunities. But obviously, these things, can they both happen at the same time? It's a good question. If we are trying to produce more aquaculture to export to generate FX, obviously that aquaculture is not going to be available to address the feeding needs of a growing population in Nigeria. So how to prioritize? I'm not an economist, sorry. I am a businessman. Obviously, I do understand the context of the country, and I think we all do to a certain degree. So I think it's a conversation that needs to be had very seriously and needs to be looked at very seriously. The more FX we generate will help us as a country because, we're very heavily import dependent, as we all know, and, basic demand and supply. The more demand there is for dollar and the less supply of dollar that is available is only going to drive the price of the dollar up. So we need to be generating more revenue, FX revenue. So there is more supply of dollar, which will put less pressure on it, which would mean that, the dollar price can start to stop going up so much, which has so many knock-on effects, including the cost of the production of fish in the first place. As the very able speakers before me had noted, noted, because we import a lot of the stuff that goes into fish feeders. So this is a key conversation to be had. Now, at the time of stating the topic of my presentation, I was going to go in a very different direction with it. However, this over the last few days and thinking about it, I decided to do a little bit of change and speak more to the exportation side of aquaculture and the exportation potentials there. So on that note, we tried to export, when we wanted to first export dried fish, we tried to, and we kept hearing you can't export dried fish. Naturally, I see that as a potential problem. And the next question was why? Why can we not export dried fish? And as is typical in Nigeria, most people did not nobody had a reason why. It's just that, dried fish is banned, dried fish is banned. Okay, why is it banned? What is the problem? How does that work? And after a lot of exploration, we were able to come to some degree of an answer. Now, you can actually export dried fish, right? Or an aquaculture product. But the limitation is that you can only export on a personal basis. So if you have an individual who wants to buy dried fish for their personal consumption in their house, pretty much anywhere across the world, you can export it. There are some limitations as to the volumes you can export, because obviously volume is what makes the difference between personal and commercial. So there are limitations as to the volume you can export. It generally stands at about 20 kilos per shipment to an individual per day, right? So UPS, DHL, most of these guys, they'll carry it. You have to get some additional documentation from the quarantine service, but it is doable, right? So we have been doing this now for a while. The volumes we're exporting are not really, they're not really for the facility we have and the capacity we have to produce. The volumes we're exporting are not really using up our capacity properly. So we are very interested in the commercial export of dried fish. Now, you can't commercially export aquaculture products from Nigeria. There are some caveats to this, and I'll speak to all of this a little bit later. But just for clarity of this conversation, yes, you can actually export on a personal basis. Now, I want to look at the potentials of aquaculture exports, right, and its potentials to generate revenue. So this is a P&L for a typical export shipment that we send out, right? So we can see from here, the revenue here. So this is revenue converted back at, the current parallel market rates, right? So this is the revenue we'll be looking at from a shipment. I believe I used the 10 kg shipment for these numbers here, right? Just to give you a rough idea. So this is revenue, and this is revenue at the top, total expenses at the bottom, and the net profit margin from this type of trade is here. And it's about 12.7%, which is really, it's decent. That's not bad at all, especially considering the cycle of the money from when you process to when you ship to when it gets to your customer and you get your payments, right? Now, what I really wanted to focus on here was the transportation cost. If you look at it, the third expense item here, that is 54% of the cost in this business. That is a huge number. It's about 13,000 naira per kg via DHL. So that is huge, absolutely huge. And I think the point I really wanted to highlight here was that as much as this is such a high number, I mean, think about it. You're sending products. The core fish itself is costing you 84,000, but the transportation is costing you 130,000. That's absolutely insane. But what I really wanted to highlight here was that even with this outrageous cost of transportation, we are still able to send product out and make a decent margin on it. Now, by a small comparison, right, if we cut down this transportation cost by 50%, sorry, that's not even exactly 60%, but if we bring it down to say 75,000 naira, right, this is through another form of transportation. So potentially sea transportation. It is actually going to be significantly cheaper than this. But what we focus on here is the jump in the net margin and the profitability of this transaction. So again, showing more, shedding more light on the potentials of aquaculture to generate FX for Nigeria as a country. Generally, in terms of production of catfish, Of course, there's room for improvement on the technicalities. There's a lot of room for improvement. However, Nigeria is not in a bad position as far as it goes when it comes to catfish production in particular. So it is an area where I feel like, you know, we already have a certain degree of strength, right? And with a certain degree of work on it, there is potential for it to earn us a lot of FX. In terms of the demand across the globe, it is huge. The speakers before me have spoken to that. So it is something that we can look at very seriously as a country, and we can try to, you know, start to service and try to generate some of that FX. Now, going back to the challenges to commercial exports. From our research and our findings, and, you know, I would be very, very open to anyone shedding more light on this from their own experience. But as far as the EU goes, and the UK, one of the major hindrances to commercial exportation of aquaculture is the lack of a national residue monitoring plan. Now, to put it simply, a residue monitoring plan is it's a government developed and government run plan, whereas producers of aquaculture, it's not just specific to agriculture, but in this case, producers of agriculture they have to pretty much send samples of their products to a government approved lab at a government approved frequency to be monitored for certain residues within the product. So these residues can include stuff like drugs and vaccines, which are, you know, which are not necessarily fit for human consumptions, to other things, you know, as, you know, petrochemicals, other forms of chemicals, just stuff that is dumped in the waterway. So essentially, a residue monitoring plan is a government effort to ensure that a line of agricultural produce is fit for human consumption. Nigeria does not have one of these. It's not just specific to aquaculture. I know that we had a similar issue with our honey at a certain point in time. I'm not sure what progress has been made on that so far, but we don't have one of these. Now, are there ways around this? Absolutely. This is not, it's not the biggest of problems to solve. It is the type of thing that, you know, with the right type of focus and organization, we can put this in place, and we can give our fish farmers an opportunity. Hello?
You have 1 minute more.
Okay. We can give our fish farmers an opportunity to tap into, you know, the global demand for aquaculture products that there is. This can work and everyone can win because, again, we don't produce our own fish now. We currently buy from third-party producers, but with good processors and exporters, right, with, you know, standard facilities set up, they can work with smallholder farmers. They can hold that technical knowledge that is required from the residual monitoring perspective and ensure that, you know, smallholders that they work with as outgrowers can stick to these standards. And, you know, they can buy from the smallholders, do the processing, meet the high standards, and do the exportation, and everyone can win. The whole value chain can really win from this. Obviously, the smallholders winning means the feed mills win, and everybody wins across board. The maize, the soybeans producers, they also win as well. So there can be that knock-on effect across board. I think it's a real opportunity, and I think it's something that we should genuinely look at as a country. Now, as a company, we are currently trying to work around the lack of a national residual monitoring plan. I'll be happy to speak to anyone about this sort of separately. I don't think my people will be very pleased with me if I, you know, if I spoke to all the details of what we're trying to do currently. However, it's something that we're happy to discuss further and, you know, get other people on board with it. And on that note, yes, thank you very much. I hope that was informative and enjoyable, and I'll hand the microphone back over to the team. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Oguno. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. I think one of the key issues that I think EU had with Nigeria some years ago, after they had a restriction on the export of the fish, especially dried fish, is a chemical residue. And I think that was when the prices of fish feed increased so high that some actors were actually trying to cut costs. So while cutting costs, there are some things that were used, which, you know, after testing, you know, the residue level was so high. I think it has been a major problem. And up to now, The embargo on commercial export is still there, I think, and that is where we actually need the policymaker to come in to actually help to do that, because chemical residue is maximum, that's the MRL, that's the maximum residue level is key for export, because every countries actually have their MRL for different products, and for fish, especially dry fish, they have their MRL. So as far as they do not trust our produce in terms of our MRL, it's still on like a banned country where they cannot import fish product from. So I think we need to look at this. I know that in US, some companies actually trying to also export. From the last report I read that in US, only one company in Nigeria was actually certified to actually export fish products into US. But we need more policy to help checkmate, and also some form of interventions. So before we go to the panel discussion, I think Mr. David is back. Maybe we'll have to, okay, let me just say one or two things about, I think I've introduced him, that Mr. David is the Sales and Financial Planning Manager for Olam, and we'll be talking about solutions to the challenges of the fishery and aquaculture sector in Nigeria. Yes. So Mr. David, you have the floor? Can we have you? Thank you.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Mr. David.
Okay. I apologize for the mishap with my systems. I kept having my Zoom crash both on my phone and on my laptop. Okay, so right now I'm using my phone to do this presentation. I just hope that it will be able to go very well. While I try to set up my, I'm actually having some issues since I'm using my phone. I can't set up my presentation here. Okay, so I guess I would just go out without my presentation. I will be speaking on the fisheries and aquaculture subsector in Nigeria, challenges and proposed solutions. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. David, we can hear you loud and clear.
I can hear you.
The fisheries and aquaculture subsector in Nigeria, challenges and proposed solutions. I'm supposed to go through a basic introduction, scope of discussion, socio-political environment of operations for which my topic will be based on, the sector, its contribution to Nigeria, the subsector, the aquaculture, with a focus on catfish farming, the challenges faced and the proposed solutions, and then conclude. Hopefully I do this in 10 minutes. So first of all, as I've been said, I currently working with Olam, and where the sector part of Olam I'm with is the animal feeds and proteins, which basically focuses on chicken feed, the chicks, and the fish feed. I function specifically for the fish feed, which is the aquaculture sector. So the scope of our discussion, we're going to be looking at basically what's happening in Nigeria. Nigeria as a country, and the context under which we're all agricultural, subsector behavior, agriculture, and people viewing. This will help us get a guideline with the operations and solutions to these things. So statistics basically for Nigeria shows that with a population of about 211 million people, as stated by the United Nations Population Fund, a 2.6 increase from 2015. We have life expectancy of men 54 to 56, and a population between the ages of 15 to 64, making 53.9% of the total population of Nigeria. So this goes to put to light that we have the working class population. I'm bringing this in because when I get to the part where I will make mention of entrepreneurship as part of the problems we're facing in this country, it just goes to show that the greater population that could cause a change in this nation are actually the working class people. So we've had issues concerning performance of our economy, FX issues, we've had issues with slow GDP growth, there's inflation on the rise, cost of materials are always on the increase. So these things have come to be sort of a problem for both the businessmen and the farmers. So looking at the sector, we're looking at agriculture, which has made a contribution of about over 22% to GDP in the last few years and has contributed to well over 35% of employment in the nation. The largest produce from agriculture, basically cassava, is with over 60 million tons, is basically the driving force for the agricultural sector. Major subsectors under agriculture, we're looking at crop production, livestock, forestry, fishery, or aquaculture, which is now going to be the focus of the discussion. So the subsector we're looking at is the aquaculture with a focus on fish farming. So typically, when we speak of fish farming, we're looking at catfish farming for specifics. We're looking at the act of growing the diverse groups of catfish. I know the African catfish has been mentioned as the predominant catfish being reared in Nigeria. This also involves the growing of the catfish, the caring of the fish, building of the ponds, production of the feed, and the whole lot down the value chain. So basically, when we're speaking of catfish or the fish production generally now, what are the challenges faced? A number of this have been mentioned, but we're also looking at factors of production, the issues we're having with land, how available is land, because quite a great number of fish farmers rather deal with the earthen ponds than building the tarpaulin or block ponds or concrete ponds per se. We have issues relating to labor. How good, understanding the mentality of Nigerians, a great number of youths right now can be seen as people who get very industrious, but the question holds that are they people who really have the patience to wait through the time for agriculture to bring forth its produce? So with this, there is usually problems with labor. We're also looking at capital, both financial and human capital. How easy is it for corporates to get funding from the banks? How easy is it for the farmers to access loans, finances that they can put into the business to help get feed, which contributes to about 60 to 70% of the cost incurred by any fish farmer in the country? And we're looking also at the issue of entrepreneurship. The people, the Nigerian people really interested in farming to get it, to grow it to a very large scale. We're also looking at issues with availability of raw materials. I, for one, know that we face quite a great deal of challenge, even in Olam, to get raw materials for production of feed. We're looking at getting, we're trying to get wheat, a couple of other blood meal. These things have to be imported into the country, where you get local produce that will be milled. The quality of these things get to change over time. So you have to do constant monitoring. So we have issues with standardization of inputs for production. So what's also the cost of importation? We know that over the last 4 or 5 months, with devaluation of Naira, issues concerning FX have also caused cost importation to continually go, the cost of importation to continually rise for these companies. So FX that used to purchase inputs are not, these things are not readily available. So you're trying to buy dollar for importation. There's a long queue with CBN. And if you try to say other routes, are we making good enough exports for us to get the dollar to use for purchases? These questions are always before us and causing issues. So continual falling value of the Nigerian naira is another challenge we get to face, being a corporate body. Also, on the farmer side, what are the challenges the farmers get to face? Having to interface with a lot of farmers, they can readily tell you that the biggest challenge the Nigerian farmers face is source of fund. Money, money, money is what you hear any and every time you deal with the Nigerian farmer. This is basically because the category of people who majorly go into farming in Nigeria are the low-income earners. Yes, it's good that we now have some mid to high-class earners going into farming and doing mechanized farming and large-scale farming with good technology at use. But the bulk of these numbers are always the low-income earners. So the first and major challenge from the farmer's point of view is source of fund. Availability of funds is a problem. But then this always goes back to if the banks or the commercial banks are willing to fund your project, do you have data backing up your production? You have the numbers stating that, okay, I put in this amount of fishes and I've been able to generate this amount of income over the 4, 5, 6 months period of each cycle of fish. Do I have records showing the diseases that can readily affect the farms? Do I have numbers showing the quality of the feed? Have I carried out tests to show that, okay, these oxygen levels affect the fish this much or that? So data is also a problem for the farmers. We also have factors of production being some challenges to the farmers. Land, how easy is it to get land? Easy is it for the farmers to get available land, especially in the Southwest region? The cost of labor down just in some regions tends to be really high. The capital being a challenge also, and also trustworthy hands that can help the farmers put their business, make their business profitable. We also have high cost of farming inputs. The farmers keep complaining that the cost of feed is always on the increase and that companies are always changing the prices. This has, on the corporate end, has to do with availability of funds and cost of FX to them. So we have for the farmers, there's also issues with crude inefficient methods of operations with poor research. How many farmers in Nigeria will be able to tell you that I've separated this pond for research to know how oxygen levels affect the growth of the fish, how this feed can give you this exact number of profitability as compared to this other feed? The farmers basically involved with crude methods of operation, and with very poor research. We also have inadequate storage and processing facilities. Most of the farmers do direct to farm market sales. So when the market people want to get the fish, they come directly, pick up, they make payments to the farmers and take to the marketplace to sell. So issues with smoking of the fish to make them dry so that they can be stored for a long time, to get proper industrial ovens on the farms to make fish available over a long period. These are all challenges, majorly because the farmers are not able to access funds to get these things. There's also lack of information with the farmers. What each farmer knows is basically what he has gathered through experience. on the farm. So you find out that most times when these farmers are going into operation, at the first few years, they experience a great deal of losses. There are sicknesses affecting the fishes, except those who take the time out to do a bit of research. But this research and the information available to the farmers are not even at par with what you have in other neighboring countries. So if we say these are the challenges, what then will be proposed solutions, or what can we say will be contributions from the government and the corporate bodies to help solve most of this problem, which is the focus of my discussion, basically. So the first point I have here is improvement in the quality of education in the country. Skilled input produces increased skilled input produces increased quality of output, reduces wastages as things are done better, increases quality of research and output. The quality of education goes more than just saying the quality of education. So how much research is done? How in-depth is the education? How much research, how much contribution is the agricultural educational sector providing to the subsector of aquaculture? We have the school of thought that if government and corporate bodies can go on to fund researches, the quality of education, set up schools dedicated to aquaculture, then this will have positive input to the quality of output, because typically how it works is the educational sector do researches and feedback to the businesses. This in turn will cause increase in input, and then they feed one another with what's happening on the farm, and they carry out more researches. We're also looking at saying if the government can create better trade zones or farming spots. I know that over time, if discussions can come up with government saying that, okay, for each state, if the government can dedicate this amount of land to say for farming or for aquaculture, then the cost of acquiring land will be significantly dropped for each farmer going into the aquaculture. This reduction in cost of land or duties, imports from trade zones, reduce taxes for manufacturers who would want to go into manufacturing of fish feed and other equipment to help the fish farmers. These things will ultimately reduce the cost and help farmers to be more profitable. We also have issues with market structures because the bulk of the profits do not even go to the farmers. The bulk goes to...
you have like 1 minute more, please. 1 minute.
Okay, the bulk goes to the middlemen. We're also looking at provision of credit facilities to farmers. If corporate organizations can open up incubators for budding entrepreneurs as corporate social responsibilities, then a group of individuals who are currently unemployed will be able to go up to this place and set up fish farms. The government should also focus on policies to encourage and create a friendly and welcoming business environment. From the farmers' end, there will be need for increased research and development of processes, procedures, and methods, introduction of technology for scaling up and faster processing of outputs. We should also focus on quality of outputs rather than just on cost-cutting measures. There should be accurate record keeping for access to facilities and understand the rate of variation of breeding conditions to the output. So basically, in conclusion, I would say that tackling the challenges faced by this subsector is not solely the responsibility of and cannot be done by one party alone. It should be a collective effort of the government, the aqua associations, aqua bodies, corporate bodies, the farmers, and at the end, there will be a more profitable that will help boost national economy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. David. That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. We learned one of two things, and one key thing is that everyone needs to be involved. That is one key thing, that everyone needs to be involved in providing solution in the fishery and aquaculture subsector. So before we move to the panel discussion, for those that are listening to us, if you have any question, kindly use the chat box. Yes, you can use the chat box to write any of your question, and during the Q&A, we'll be able to respond to it. And also during the panel discussion, if some of your question, we could attend to it. And we have 3 panelists currently. I will be reading the citation. We have Dr. Ebinibi Ansah. Dr. Ebinibi Ansah. Dr. Ebinibi Ansah is a research scientist and director at the African Regional Aquaculture Center, a department of Nigeria Institute for Oceanography and Marine Research, with over 25 years experience in fishery biology and aquaculture management. She's presently the Vice President of Award Country Chapter, Nigeria Women in Agricultural Research for Development, NIWAD. Dr. Ansah is also a member of other professional associations, including the World Aquaculture Society, WAS, and Fisheries Society of Nigeria, FISO, where she's a fellow and the vice president in charge of the Fishery Institute and linkages. Due to her effort in the advancement of sustainable aquaculture development in Nigeria, she was appointed special advisor on aquaculture and fisheries to the governor of Bayelsa State from May 2016 to January 2019, and was a coordinator and member of the Aquaculture Working Group of the African Fisheries Reform Mechanism and of the Africa Union Inter-African Bureau for Animal Resources. Dr. Ansah seeks solutions to mitigate the problems attributed to climate change and pollution effects on aquatic life through culture of selected species of migratory prawns, sedentary mangrove, oyster, catfish, and tilapia, amongst others. Being a farmer and certified trainer of the Nigeria Agriculture Enterprise Curriculum for entrepreneurship training of farmers, she has been able to positively influence hundreds of farmers and fish processors on fins and shellfish production and product development across Nigeria through research, training, and skills development of this farmer in partnership with many organizations. Dr. Ansah is God-fearing and draws strength in service to God and humanity. She's married to Dr. Joseph Ansah and they are blessed with children. And I will read Mr. Lanre Badmus' citation, who also one of our panelists. Mr. Olariwaju Badmus was a lecturer and former head of department at Federal College of Animal Health and Production and National Veterinary Research Institute, Vuam, Plateau State, a former vice president of the Fisheries Society of Nigeria, FISO, currently the Pioneer Regional Director, World Aquaculture Society, Africa Chapter, West African Region. He's a practicing fish farmer and also a consultant. And lastly, the last panelist is Mr. Remi Abioye. Mr. Remi Abioye attended University of Rhode Island, Kingston, USA from 1986 to 1987, where he obtained a Master of Marine Affairs degree and also a Master in International Affairs and Strategic Studies degree from the Nigeria Defense Academy, Kaduna. He worked in Federal Civil Service of Nigeria for 35 years, from February 1983 to February 2018, retiring as a Director of Fisheries in the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. He functioned as the Regional Director Northwest of the Ministry from December 2015 to February 2018. He served earlier as a Special Assistant to the Honorable Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development, Dr. Akin Adesina, from 2011 to 2012. So we welcome our 3 panelists, Mr. Lanre, Mr. Remi, and Dr. Ebini Ansah. So, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Glad to be here.
Same here. So, and before we go for our panel discussion, there's a question. Is that the question which I want our attendants to actually, our attendees, sorry, to actually respond. Do you agree that the government has more responsibilities than the private sector to revive the fisheries and aquaculture sector? So we have 3 people, about 15% now. So we actually want to see a response. Do we agree that government has more responsibility than private sector to revive the fisheries and aquaculture sector? Okay. We have about 35 participants have voted. We're still waiting for others to vote before we start the panel discussion. We need at least 60% of the attendees to vote. Yeah, we have 40% now. So waiting for others. 45% now.
The default says the hosts and the panelists cannot vote.
Yes, yes, the host and panelists cannot vote. Only the other attendees can vote.
Okay.
Okay, we have 50% now. We need 10% more. Okay, we have 10 seconds to end the poll. Okay, so we have 47%. Okay, 52% now. I think that's a good one. 2, 1, 0. So we can end the poll. I'll end the poll right now. So let me share the result of the poll. It says that, out of 52% that actually voted, about 73% believe that yes, government has more responsibility than the private sector to revive the fisheries and aquaculture, whereas 27% said no, it means that private sector has more responsibility than the government. So, Dr. Ansah, so I want us to actually talk more about this. What is your own view about this? Do you agree that government has more responsibility? And if yes, what areas or what type of things or roles that the government needs to play? And if it's no, if you believe that private sectors actually have more responsibilities, what type of roles do private sector needs to play to revive the fishery and agricultural subsector? So Dr. Ansah, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be here. And that question is very tricky because for me, I believe everyone, both government and private sector, have specific roles to play, because if we look at the production, both in the fisheries subsector and the aquaculture subsector, you'll find out that the private sector is driving the business. Governments can create enabling environments for these businesses to do well. Governments can make access to finance less cumbersome through these policies and also influence certain things. For instance, one of the guest speakers from Efugo Farms talked about the rising cost of fish feeds, which drove the farm to reduce production of their catfish. So now what can government do to help that situation? I think governments can regulate the cost of materials, particularly fish meal, which most of what the millers use, they import. What can government do to see how we can produce the same fish meal locally to cut costs because of the high foreign exchange to buy imported fish meal? A few weeks ago, we had a training at the African Regional Aquaculture Center on feed milling, and we used local fish meal to compound the feeds. Now, someone will say, how much of that can you get? Yes, we may not get much, but something has to start from somewhere. If we boost the fisher folk, who are the main suppliers of this fish meal, we boost their production capacities, then they'll be able to provide us with more fish meal. And at the end of the day, we can even standardize what are the requirements. Where would they get this fish meal from? What do they need? What inputs do they require, particularly their boats, and then the security on the waterways? How can the government make it safe for these artisanal fishermen to go out there and get the needed ingredients to make the fish feed less expensive? It's quite outrageous because everyone is affected. And at the end of the day, the consumers don't have enough fish on their table because of the roles that are being played and the roles that are not being played. So government has a major role to play, but the private sector will drive the business. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ansah. Mr. Larry, I know she actually, from what she said the government has roles to play, and she highlighted some of the roles that government can play to actually help the private sector. Now, for your own view, I want to know, do you think that, yes, the government is playing, for the roles that government is playing, do we think that is enough to actually encourage more private actors to come into the sector, or you think, or you want to, or you believe that government should play more, and what are the roles, or where should government play in? Thank you. Mr. Larry, are you there? Hello, Mr. Larry. I think Mr. Larry is having a technical issue. Okay, let me go to Mr. Remy. Mr. Remy.
Yes, please.
Okay, sir.
First of all, I'd like to say a big thank you for this opportunity to share knowledge. As Dr. Ebinimi Ansah said, everybody has a role to play, but the enabling environment must be provided by the government. Talking about policies, building policies, there's a need to identify the gaps. There's a need to build linkages in whereby the private sector looks at itself as being the better player or the best player in the industry. There are instances whereby the government, inputs from the private sector. So I want to advocate for more inclusiveness in many areas. Research linkages. There are many research findings on the table that up till today, they've not been put into use. There is a need for even research institutes to put on the shelf what they have. I remember many years ago, when we just joined the civil service in 1983, thereabout, it was as if Nigeria could not produce fish. Aquaculture was at a very low ebb. But in 2005, President Obasanjo hosted the whole world. There was this Fish for All Summit. And that was the beginning of transformation in fish production in Nigeria. It opened the eyes of everybody to the potentials, the opportunities in aquaculture. I think we need to continue in that stead, to continue to let people know, especially the private sector, where are the areas they can come in, and the government should produce an enabling environment. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. For the enabling environment, I know that we asked for enabling environment. My question is, what are the key things that we will see that will say, oh, yes, the government is creating this enabling environment. I know Dr. Ebinibi actually made mention of enabling environment. You also emphasize on enabling environment. So what are the key things for us to see that, yes, government is providing enabling environments?
All right. Let me start with policy formulation. When we, or let me say in the fisheries, it might surprise us to note that the private sector, the NGOs, the development partners, at the end of the day, what we have is not sufficient to drive the sector. And that's why I'm calling again that at the onset, when we're talking about policy formulation, there is a need to bring everybody on board. There's a need to get inputs from everyone. Then we can subject it. There could be validation of, these are eventually accepted and before they are implemented. So that's the starting point. Also, there's a need to sensitize the legislature at the federal level, at the state level, even at the local government level, because most of these things, once the policy is legislated, you can't go outside of it. So most of the committee members, this committee on agriculture or whatever, they have limited knowledge, especially about the fisheries sector. So we need to go out. Faison is doing a great job. Let me commend Faison Assembly. We're trying to get some things like National Assembly. And I want to put it on record that the current leadership of Faison has done more in engaging the legislators. So we need more of these efforts. Then I want to invite the private sector also. There's a need for the private sector to come on board and collaborate with government. Everybody thinks any policy from government has something hidden. It shouldn't be so. There should be improved fisheries governance. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Aderemi. And Mr. Larry Badmos, are you back? Are you here now? Mr. Larry, are you with us?
I think he has left.
Okay, I think he's having technical issue. Okay, Dr. Ansah, I know that you actually, from your citation, I saw something about your interest in climate change, and the issue of climate change, you hear everywhere, climate change, the world is talking about climate change. In Nigeria, people are talking about climate change, and we see the more focus will be on the farmers, will be the crop farmers. And I actually know that is a big problem in the whole of agriculture. And I just wanted to shed more light on the impact of climate change on aquaculture and fishery, especially on the livelihood of those that depend on the subsector, on the people that depend on it. So I want you to share more light so that people, companies, especially companies in the aquaculture, working with smallholder farmers, either the fisher folks, working with them, could actually also know how best to develop policies that will help them to mitigate the impact of climate change. You have the floor, Doctor.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to just add something based on the inputs by Mr. Aderemi Abioye before I talk on the climate change. Can I go ahead?
You can, please.
Okay, so what I think could be done also is for governments to create synergy platforms where people can interface, organizations can interface. Now, from what the other speakers have discussed so far, it appears that in the industry, everybody's just doing what they know how to do best and just remain there without interfacing. For instance, the feed millers, the research institutions, the farmer associations, and the farmers should have a platform where they can talk and take decisions and make things happen in the subsector. So I just wanted to add that. And you know that we have the research institutions, the Nigerian Institute for Oceanography and Marine Research.
Hello, Dr. Ansa. I think she's having a technical issue. I think it's network.
Research.
Okay.
We have, sorry, I think I was muted, concerning
Hello, Dr. MDB. Hello? Okay. Okay, I think you are muted. You are muted. Please unmute yourself.
Okay, so sorry about that.
Okay.
I had network glitch there.
All right.
You know, so I was just saying, so there must be a platform where all the players can sit together, take decisions, and make the market move. Also, diversity of organisms that we can culture. We have shellfish, we're not talking about them. The crustaceans, like the shrimps, the crabs, we can culture those as well. The Nigerian Institute for Oceanography and Marine Research and the African Regional Aquaculture Center based in Port Harcourt all have information regarding these technologies to grow mollusks, shrimps, and other fin fish species, but our focus has been mainly on the catfish. So if we have collaborators, we could work together and see how we can make more fish food available, okay? Because since 2005, when the Fish for All event took place in Abuja, we've not seen much difference apart from the volume of catfish being produced. So I think that's one thing I believe can help that enabling environment to create synergy platform for players to share their views. So the other aspect of climate change, I'll just give an example. In 2012, there was a devastating flood in the Niger Delta. That affected so many states in the region and savings, all their to the flood. And this is a point in what happened. We can say it could be due to the effects of climate change. So how can this be mitigated? What could be done? One thing I had to start researching about is the use of cages in fish ponds. For instance, in Bayelsa, a lot of the farmers there, because of their peculiar situation, use earthen ponds to raise their fish. Those are the enclosures that are more common. The surface tanks, the tarpaulin ponds are few. Why? Fish pond, you can retain water because the soil is more of clay in most areas. So you can retain water all year round. So you don't need to depend on borehole water. Now, why don't they want to depend on borehole water? Most of the states, the borehole water is laden with iron. And iron is not that's ferrous compounds. They are not good for fish production. It lowers the metabolic rates of the fish. And also, if the fish is eating, there may not be any increase or significant increase in the weight of the fish, you know. And in some cases, if the iron content is too high, you could experience mortalities. So the people have learned to use the earthen ponds and save water, you know, in their ponds all year round. So in such a situation, when the flood comes, they lose everything because the dikes are far below certain flood levels, which are unprecedented. It's not a regular thing. The floods come annually, but once in maybe 50 years, you have these high flood levels. And if it's just once in 50 years, then they could prepare. Right now, it happens almost every year. So what are they going to do? They can revert to using cages in their ponds. And we've done some test trials and they worked perfectly. So even while your fish is in your pond, you can secure them. If you see the flood waters rising, you can secure them in your cages. And these are floating cages, so the fish will remain afloat inside the cage and not be carried away by the flood. So that's one major area that could be done. And then even in the raising of the shellfishes like the mangrove oyster, from time we've done researches in ARAC, that's the African Regional Aquaculture Center, and we've raised them in cages. So these things are ways of reducing the effects of climate change. Although it comes with a cost, but at the end of the day, you are sure that you have your fish and you'll be able to sell, not that you lost everything to flood.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Ansa. I think because of our time, do we have any, the attendees, do we have any question for our panelists or for our guest speakers? Do we have any questions before I go?
Excuse me, please.
Mr. Adiremi.
Excuse me, please.
Okay.
I'd like to add to what Dr. Ansa said concerning climate change, just in 1 minute.
Okay.
You asked about the impact of climate change on the aquaculture industry and fishing industry. The impacts include, you know, floods, droughts, desertification. It can bring about dried lakes, wetlands, rivers, and streams. There's loss of habitat. There's loss of fish biodiversity. There's also loss of livelihoods in fishing communities. It can also create user conflicts between fisher folk. You see some of these fishermen, some of them are called Malian fishermen. They come all the way from Mali and they are causing trouble in Nigeria. Some of the guys causing trouble in the Northwest, they are said to be non-Nigerians. So some of these things could be the impacts of climate change. So you have conflicts between the locals and the migrants, and also between fisher folk and other users like the herders or farmers. This can also lead to migration, like I said, which can bring about social conflicts and also decrease fish production. One thing we can do also is to create awareness. There is a kind of alert system so that these fishermen, these fisher folk will know when there will be climate change, when it is imminent, or when it's imminent, sorry, they should be prepared. There should be an awareness mechanism to prepare them so that those who are living in the flood zones, the flood prone areas, they should leave the place. Then those who are establishing fish ponds and whatever, they should be guided that they should not put it in an area that is prone to flooding. So those are some of the actions we can take. Thank you.
So much, Mr. Adiremi. I think before I actually think there's only one question, but it's not for our panelists. So before we round up and go to Q&A, a closing remark from Dr. Ansa and also a closing remark from Dr. Adiremi. So Dr. Ansa, so your closing remark in 1 minute.
Okay, I would like to say a very big thank you to all the organizers and the Nigerian-Belgian Chamber of Commerce the guest speakers and my fellow panelists for this wonderful event. I also want to use this opportunity to invite us for more discussions at the Fisheries Society of Nigeria conference coming up on the 24th to the 29th of October at the University of Port Harcourt. I believe this platform is a stepping stone to that event because more of these discussions will actually go on there. I also want to invite especially the Nigerian-Belgian Chamber of Commerce to partner with the Fisheries Society with us on some level. And we need this kind of interactions. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you to all our listeners who have been here. I want to especially recognize my mentor, Professor Stella Williams. Thank you, Mommy, for coming on board. God bless everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ansa, and thank you also. Mr. Adiremi, your closing remark.
Thank you very much. And also, thank you for the invitation. I look forward to this kind of opportunity in the future. But let me add, before I close, that I wish we had more time to talk about value chain development. It's a way, if you actually want to promote fisheries, we must identify the value chain, or we must utilize the value chain approach, looking at it from the input to production, to processing, to marketing. If we don't fix a particular part, like we were taught that if you don't fix the market, your production is just a wasted effort. So we must learn how to fix the market, how to create a market information system, how to connect buyers with sellers. So those are the kind of things we need. There must be a value chain development approach to fisheries and aquaculture development. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Adiremi. And that's actually will be a very good discussion, but because of our time constraint, that's why we're unable to talk about the value chain approach. Okay, thank you so much, panelists. And also we have some questions. I think if you have any question, you can raise your hand. I will recognize, but if you cannot, you just type in the chat box. I have about 3 questions. I think the first one goes to Mr. David. I think that is Mr. Omuko. I think so. Yes. Mr. Omuno, sorry. Mr. Ouno. What does it take to start fish export business? Mr. Oyeka asked the question that what does it, Oyekashi asked that what does it take to start fish export business? Mr. Uno, are you there? Are you still with us?
It looks like he has already left because we are a little bit late on our schedule. I don't see him anymore.
And the other 2 questions, I think I think that goes to Dr. Ansa. Please, can I have more information about the FISO conference? Mr. Samuel Oga is actually wanting to know more about the FISO conference.
Okay, so I just posted the website address on the chat box, www.fison.org.ng. You can get more information there. Thank you.
And lastly, somebody said, Mr. Benjamin, I think the question will go to Mr. Adiremi. Why can't the government continue distribution of fingerlings as was done some years back? Why can't the government continue distribution?
I am retired now, so I can't speak for the director, but the little I know is that there was so much inefficiency in that scheme. And for it to be very effective, I think we need to rearrange or reorganize the way that fishermen or fish farmers are organized. Or how do I put it? They are scattered. We need to have fisheries cooperatives, fish farmer cooperative societies, and we must empower them to play their roles. And we must also allow the NGOs to be involved in it. If you leave it to government departments to do, I can assure you a lot of factors will come in that will not make it to work. So let the NGOs, let them be the ones to drive this. It is doable. And I hope the state governments will embrace it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We actually are time constrained. Okay. I think Mr. Benjamin is ready. And I will give Mr. Benjamin 2 minutes.
Okay. Actually, I thank God for this type of program. I was late because I was somewhere else. If we look at it, somebody asked that question. Actually, it's not me. I just reposted it because no comment was made on it. And where government drive production, it doesn't work out. Even outside Nigeria and other African countries, where they are doing little things and it's working, is the private sector. So the private sector should come into some of all these things that we have said today, like NGO, just like my senior there have said, NGOs coming in to drive it. Fisheries in Nigeria, for example, artisanal fisheries, we don't have census of the fishermen that we have. If they set up cooperative, now before you know, individual will just write full name. That's what happened before. Write names, then the cooperatives are not there. So we need to continue to talk and to put pressure, whether on government, to sensitize the people to do the right thing. And we too, as members of FISON, we should also be touching everywhere that we know that we will be able to educate people so that they come in and take some of all this knowledge that is lying fallow. I think when we do that, we'll be okay.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, before we go, I think, is Mr. Larry there? So I want him to just say a remark, just 2 minutes. I think this network has been having issue. Just a remark from me. Mr. Larry, are you there? Oh, I think it's network also. Okay, maybe we won't be able to have him. So on behalf of our chamber, Nigeria-Belgian Chamber of Commerce, we would like to thank our guest speakers, our keynote speaker, and our panelists and our participants for dedicating time, time for speakers, time they prepare to come, the presentations and the likes. Really appreciate you. Thank you for the participants for coming. It's because you are here, that's why we have this webinar. Thank you so much. And for this program, you will receive the recording and the presentations of the speakers. We'll actually send that to your email. Maybe before next week or so, you will receive that in your email. And we also like you to follow us on our social media platform, and our IG, and also our link on LinkedIn on Nigeria-Belgian Chamber of Commerce, to also get more information on more of our webinars. We do have webinars on different sectors, and agriculture is one of it, and that is why we are having this. We've had some in the past. So, and also if you have other areas of interest, you can always check up on our social media platform. So thank you everyone for attending this webinar. We really appreciate you. And lastly, I still remain Babatunde Olaiwaju Emmanuel. I work with Futux Agri Consult Limited. And Futux Agri Consult is a private agri extension company. We work with smallholder farmers, helping to build capacities. So thank you so much, and I wish you a wonderful day, and also enjoy the rest of your week. Bye-bye, everyone. So bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Everyone have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.